So what has happened since Accra? Well, surprisingly, the documents of this expert meeting and many panelists before me have stated that recent boom and bust cycles have been primarily determined by fundamentals of both supply and demand, fluctuations in global aggregate demand, growing demand and consumption by non-OECD developing countries, vigorous worldwide economic growth led by China, or actual or perceived supply disruptions. Let me tell you all something. Nothing within the fundamental concept of supply and demand justifies a doubling of oil prices in merely 1 year's time. In fact, the world has had an oversupply of oil. The first half of 2008, world supply of oil was actually rising, while world demand for oil was falling. Recent data released by the Energy Information Administration Agency shows that world oil production increased in the first and second quarters of 2008. In December of 2007, the U.S. entered a recession. Real economic output began to fall in the first quarter of 2008. The U.S., as you all know, is the world's largest contributor to total global economic output and the largest consumer of oil worldwide. Since the Accra conference 1 year ago, crude oil prices defied the recession the U.S. entered in December 2007. They defied the laws of supply and demand, and they defied gravity by climbing an astonishing 60% from $90 per barrel in January 2008 to its peak of $147 per barrel in July 2008, and dropping approximately to $40 in December 2008. Never before in history have we seen a drop of 75% in oil prices in such a short period of time. Not to mention, market fundamentals do not warrant price jumps and drops of $5 to $10 from day to day. Large quantities of capital were invested in commodities futures markets. The first 6 months of 2008, index speculators poured between $50 to $60 billion into commodity indices, raising total investment from $178 billion in January 2008 to $317 billion in July 2008. This incursion of funds amounted to the purchase of approximately 130 to 170 million barrels of oil in futures markets, raising speculator stockpiles of oil futures from approximately 517 million barrels to 665 million barrels. Experts like Michael Masters consider this flood of money to be the primary factor driving the rise of crude oil prices from $90 in January 2008 to $140 at the end of June 2008. The buying and selling by index speculators correlates closely with the boom and bust of crude oil prices. Others have stated the reasons the price of crude oil dropped drastically from $147 to $40 were, one, the global financial crisis, and two, fear of a global recession. But why the drastic drop? Ladies and gentlemen, the speculative bubble burst. This was a question of speculation, excessive speculation. It was index speculators looking to diversify their portfolios by treating commodities as an asset class. Demand was similar to a sugar high. It was fictitious demand, fictitious growth. It was speculators purchasing oil with money they do not have for oil they have no intention of receiving. It was a market of papers, paper oil. It was the purchase of futures contracts for the purpose of private gain. It was blatant greed. It was a series of bets based upon perceptions. It was and continues to be casino capitalism. Commodities are our lifeline. They represent the most basic needs for the most humble citizens, and they are used to make a profit by speculators and hedge funds. So how did this bubble burst? It wasn't the fear of a global recession. It was a series of testimonies before U.S. Congress which began precisely in July 2008. They instilled a deep concern in Wall Street speculators who have freely speculated and manipulated commodities markets on an unregulated, over-the-counter, internet-based trading terminals. This has been coined many times the Enron, the London, or the swaps loopholes. So what's wrong? There is nothing positive about the commodities boom. You cannot make a success story out of an ethical crisis. The financial system currently serves the rich. It serves those who possess capital like Harvard Endowment, the California Pension Fund, Goldman Sachs, AIG, and other Wall Street hedge funds who are pumping money into futures markets. The tools the farmers once used to protect themselves by hedging prices on agricultural inputs have become weapons of mass financial destruction. They do not serve to help the farmer or the true producer or provider of goods. The price of oil is not established by the cost of supply and demand on the spot market. The commodities futures market set the price. If we do not fix it now and prevent another bubble from occurring, the poor stand to suffer a global financial crisis of greater proportions. Presidents, especially those who have made great efforts towards the Millennium Development Goals, are getting quite frustrated. Their governments have become victims of a lack of resources needed to finance their development and a lack of capacity to confront the challenges of globalization. Not regulating speculation stands to provoke serious threats to economic stability and democratic governance. As a result of the speculative oil bubble, the Dominican Republic has been forced to pay greater and greater amounts for petroleum. For example, as you can see here, in 2004, 1.6 billion, and it steadily increased to 4.5 billion in 2008. The first 5 months of 2008, the Dominican Republic spent almost as much as it spent on oil the entire year of 2004. So how do we correct what is wrong? Until now, the only initiative that has helped Caribbean basin nations to cope with the rising price of oil has been Petrocaribe. Thanks to the generosity and solidarity of President Hugo Chavez de Venezuela, Petrocaribe allows 19 countries to import up to 50,000 barrels of oil daily while paying in advance just 60% of the total cost and financing the remaining $40 at low interest rates. To correct what is wrong, Mr. Chairman, the United States needs to re-regulate Wall Street after deregulation done by the harmful Commodities Futures Modernization Act in 2000. Effective re-regulation requires complete market transparency and speculative position limits. Financial markets are dark. All we need to do is just turn the lights back on. In the short term, combating excessive speculation and re-regulating the commodities futures markets would help to keep commodity prices from rising and would provide governments with more financing needed to make the priority public investments for achieving the UN's Millennium Development Goals. In the long term, the re-regulation of Wall Street would serve as a practical and concrete approach towards making globalization work. It would help make markets a positive force for all the world's people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.